How did we get here? Girl power. Why girls are the answer to health in the future. My name is Shirley Gutkowski. I am a dental hygienist and international speaker on the topic of minimally invasive dentistry and dental hygiene in an effort to get the clinicians to understand how exciting remineralization therapies can be and how preventing disease can be at the hands of a dental professional. I'm also currently practicing as an orofacial myofunctional therapist at Primal Air, LLC, in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. Do you ever think about breathing in general and how tired everybody is and how drained they are and how it's hard to keep your eyes open? A lot of those kind of things are contributed to by mouth breathing. And mouth breathing is the be all and end all to a lot of different problems that you may not even think are related. And you can tell this by respiratory fitness and whether or not you can do whatever activity you're doing at your customary pace with your mouth closed. That is not to say to run slower until you can do it with your mouth closed. That is to run at your normal speed with your mouth closed. And yes, it is possible. Having the mouth closed is key. These three mammals are performing at their peak. All three of them have their mouth closed. This is one of our top cases from Primal Air of a mountain climber, a hobbyist mountain climber who just cold turkey closed his mouth when climbing, and he and his climbing partner were able to increase their climbing distance by 50% just by getting their mouth closed. So they were able to have more fun on their mountains. They were able to get home sooner with their family because they could get to the summit faster. So all of those things really helped everything in their life. They also do some road work on the days when they're not climbing, and they will pedal on these mountain roads with their mouth closed. The first time they did it, they thought that maybe their odometer had broken or maybe their watch had stopped because they had so much more energy left over and they were finished with their ride. Announcers know it, top athletes know it. This was a case here of this boxing match between an MMA fighter, McGregor, and Mayweather, the boxer, and the announcer was even commenting that McGregor looked so tired he had his mouth open. So this is a short video. You can find this separately on YouTube if you like. So there's no denying that the face has been getting smaller in evolutionary terms. But what is under debate right now is what has been happening, what changes have been happening to the size of the face in the last 150 years. Because the changes are so dramatic over this last 150 years that genetics just doesn't, or evolution just doesn't answer that level of change. And so we're starting to look more and say more about epigenetics. Epigenetics are changes to DNA that happen due to nutrition and in the environment and stress of the person hosting the DNA. So when we're talking about humans and human lifespan, it's pretty long. A generation is 20 or 30 years anymore. And so it's hard to see these changes in real time because we don't have a lot to look at as we're looking at people. And we started to see things that are what we now call normal that aren't normal only because they've been happening in in slow motion to our eyes, but evolutionarily speaking, it's been happening quite rapidly. Now, we've seen these kind of photos before, especially as sonograms, and these 3D sonograms are really something, but we're seeing this lack of a chin, that the chin is not growing to its genetic potential, and that's starting to become a topic of conversation. what we found, what Dr. Kevin Boyd found, was this comment: babies are born with a small degree of retrognathia in this textbook for lactation consultants. And he saw that and he's like, well, where's the proof? Where's that comment coming from? And he couldn't find it being referenced anywhere. And so he went to look to see if it was true. And he couldn't find it. Dr. Kevin Boyd is a pediatric dentist with a master's degree in human nutrition. And he's also put his money where his mouth is. And he has been he enrolled in a university for an undergraduate degree in anthropology, and he was found out, and they all looked at him. The suits did, the upper people there at that university, and said, "What are you doing here in this undergraduate program?" And he's like, "Well, I want access to these skulls, and this is the only way I know how to get it." So they put him into a postdoctoral program, so now he can have even better access. And what he's been finding has been unbelievable. When he looks at pre-industrial fetal skulls and newborn skulls from parents who've died from, I don't know, illness or murder or whatever, and he found that there was absolutely no evidence wherever he went, not just in this museum, but all across the globe, in archaeological digs, to measure these chins and see that the face has indeed been shrinking, specifically since the 1880s or so. So this is the angle of the chin of a pre-industrial skull, and then this is the angle of the chin that they now call normal in our times. The chin is pretty dramatic. You can see that it's set back, but we also know that the maxilla, the bone that holds all of your teeth in, all of your upper teeth, is also shrinking. And you can see how it's holding up most of the face. You can see that green bone is also showing up under the eyes, so in the bottom part of the eye socket. So that is also shrinking, and that's where the sinuses are. Now, this has been dramatically shown in the Pottinger cat study. You can find this video on YouTube as well. It is about 15 minutes long, and it's about this study that Dr. Pottinger did on a group of cats that he had from another study that he was doing. So he closed off his other study when it ended, and he started out with all of these extra cats, and he found that the cats that were fed the ancestral diet, the species-specific diet of raw meat and raw milk, continued to do well over generations. But then he had 3 other groups of cats that he fed this continuous diet over generations of either cooked milk, pasteurized milk, cooked meat, pasteurized milk, or sweetened condensed milk. And he found that the structural changes of these cats was unbelievable. And he also found that the skeletal changes were unbelievable. So this is a cat that was in one of the poor nutrition groups, in the first generation of the poor nutrition groups, and you can see how the bones never really fused. The bone density was much less and much less calcified than the other healthy cats on the healthy diet were showing. So we're starting to see that we've got some real changes in a negative way in these cats. And that's what he found as he continued on with this diet. This is a 3rd generation poor nutrition cat, and you can see there's almost no density to the bone. I think it was like 4% calcified. You can see that the bones never really fused. He called out specifically the zygoma, which is the cheekbone, and how it had deteriorated. And we can see that this is a big problem for the cats. They were not healthy. Those third generation cats on the poor diet exhibited many fractures. They were exhausted. They had poor coordination. They had poor dental problems. They had asthma. He had the first cat in the literature that presented with asthma. They had a really struggle. There was a big struggle to reproduce, and they had many stillborn kittens. And those kittens, almost all of them, had allergies. And you can see the similarities. Cats aren't people, but it sure is funny how these things continue to be showing up in humans as well. So once those cats were in their fourth generation and they were in effect dying out, he switched all the cats over to a species specific diet of raw meat and raw milk. And it took those cats 4 generations to recover from those poor diets. 4 generations on an optimal diet to get to that healthy level. What does that say about humans? When should we start? Dr. Pottinger was a contemporary of Dr. Weston A. Price of the Weston A. Price Foundation. Dr. Price was a dentist, and he noticed in his clientele, that his patients were coming back with more and more decay. Their children had more and more malocclusions, and their teeth weren't coming in right, and he didn't understand what was happening. He saw this happening, but he didn't know why. So he sold everything, and he went on a mission around the globe to visit these cloistered, sequestered communities that had no outside Western influences. These people have been living the same way that they're living for tens of thousands of years. They're eating the same food from the same place for the last 1,000 generations. And he never found dental decay. He never found malocclusions. He never found things like diabetes. He found wide arches, all the teeth fitting in all of the arches. And by the time the parents of that first next generation started eating this Western influenced diet, they started exhibiting dental decay. The children of those people who started on this Western diet already started to see malocclusions and early decay. So he started to see a lot of these same kind of things in humans. The one thing that they don't talk very much about in that, well, I think they do more than we give them credit for in his book, Dr. Weston A. Price's book, is the density and the amount of chewing that was done in those sequestered communities living on their ancestral diet. We almost never talk about chewing in this country, and it's critical to facial development. We need to chew our food. This was a study that was done by Kimberly Benkert, who is a 40-year practicing orofacial myofunctional therapist. She got together with another practitioner in Japan, and in 1987 they published this paper about chewing. And they found that the frequency of chewing cycles during a meal before and after World War II was dramatically less after. The food changed dramatically after World War II, especially in Japan. And the amount of chewing that was done during a meal after World War II was only half as long. So we started to see these kind of chewing differences as well. Today, we don't chew because we don't have to. We can drink everything. We don't chew anything unless we absolutely have to. Drinking our salad does not give us the same nutrition as chewing our salad. Our digestion starts with the smell and the sight of the food. Your saliva changes composition as you eat the food to accommodate the food that you're eating. So when you grind up a salad to drink in the car on the way to work in the morning so that you get your greens in, you're missing 80%, I don't know what percent, you're missing a big chunk of what, haha, that salad was supposed to produce for you. And we're doing this with children's foods as well. These pouch foods are horrible for children. They really damage the way that the child face grows, and that the pressures of the cheek when you suck in these vegetables, are they even vegetables by the time they get into these pouches? I don't I don't know. Why would you mix pears with squash? How is that logical? It's because of the fruit in the pear. It's the sugar in the pear. It's the apple and pear and peach. It's all sugar. Apple and sweet potatoes. Who puts those together? These are combinations that really exploit our taste for sweetness. And then by the time the child is old enough to actually eat, they don't know the difference between food and something to eat because their parents don't know the difference between food and something to eat. And the grandparents don't know that there is a comment to be made when a child is eating something to eat as opposed to food. Food does not come in packages. It has to look as close to its original makeup as possible. So I've created this nutritional continuum to kind of illustrate what I mean by that. So if you have food, it's raw, it's freshly killed, it's got fruits and vegetables and meats that all look like what they were when they came out of the ground or when they went to wherever they're going to go, wherever they came from. And then you're going to mix it, you're going to cook it, you might cut it, you might warm it up, you might fry it, you might add one or two ingredients to it or put two or three of those ingredients together. And then suddenly you start mixing things that are out of that category. Suddenly you're putting fat together with sugar. You're mixing unlike things, and you're ending up with something to eat. You're baking it so that it doesn't need to have a lot of work applied to it in order to swallow it. And then you process it even further and you dry it. You add a bunch of ingredients to it and stabilizers and all this other kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, poof, it's a toxin. So let's just take a look at what that would look like as a food. You have an apple. You cut it, you dry it, and all of a sudden it's a dried apple. Still kind of looks like an apple. Suppose it's natural. If you smash an apple and leave it lay around for a while, it's a dried apple. But there you go. You add sugar to it. You add, you know, muffin ingredients. You add fat to it most particularly. So now you have sugar and fat. Nowhere in nature is fat and sugar together ever. There is no sugar and fat together. So then you process it even further with more and more cutting and knife work and mushing and more fats and more sugars and other ingredients. Or then you take the juice out altogether and you're just left with one thing. And now we know, according to Dr. Lustig, that juice is the alcohol of the child. So now we have a complete toxin. And then we have stuff like this. We have this really cool saying, eat the rainbow, eat the rainbow. Then we put the rainbow into a blender and turned it into this brown, muddy thing. And then we add MCT oil to it. And now we've got sugar and fat again. And, it's all this horrible thing. Or worse, it turns into this. This was appalling slide number 1. This was posted by a dental hygienist who was talking about her undeniable and super consistent powerhouse every morning out the door. There's no food here at all. At all. How can this be what we would consider healthful? What she considered healthful. We also have this fat phobia that has been curated by the nutrition scientists for the last 30 or 40 years, where we've gotten away from animal fats, and that has been very detrimental. 60 to 70% of our brain is cholesterol, and your body can't make enough cholesterol to accommodate that. And then if that happens, then your children don't have enough to coat their brain or coat their entire nervous system with that myelin sheath that's made of fat. So we're starting to see that that outcome is coming as well, but I don't know that anybody else is calling Alzheimer's a fat deficiency or fibromyalgia a fat deficiency. This was a study from 2012 that looked at the over 900 people and looked at whether or not they had a high carbohydrate diet or a high fat diet, and they found that those um, people that ate a higher percent of fat had a lower incidence of Alzheimer's and or dementia. And we also have problems of knowing what to eat. Everybody wants to eat healthy, but the rules keep changing every single day. We've been eating for millennia. This planet has had people on it for 40,000 years. And those 40,000 years have sustained pretty well. And now all of a sudden, the last 50 years or the last 150 years, nobody knows what to eat. They don't know what's good for them. They've completely lost touch with their ancestral diet. And all of those things conspire to making a smaller and smaller face. So now we have young women who are having babies and they're snoring and they're starving their baby of oxygen all night long, potentially all day long. Those babies are at high risk for preterm delivery. We all know how expensive it is to have a preterm baby. And then the babies are born with this lack of a chin. This is a video I stole from, I think it was Facebook or YouTube. It's a stolen video of this poor little 2-year-old who can't breathe. Notice his chin is set far back. Look how his nose is pushed up. His nostrils are pretty much front facing. And he stops breathing. And they used a surgical option. They removed his tonsils and adenoids. He breathes quietly, but he's still not breathing right. We know today that tonsil and adenoids removal is a temporary solution, and his mouth was not trained in what to do. He's quiet, but he's not healthfully. He's not breathing healthfully. We know today that pediatric obstructive sleep apnea in non-obese children is a disorder of facial growth. The tongue needs to touch up against the palate to press the palate from newborn on to stimulate that suture down the middle of your palate. You can feel it with your tongue tip if you drag your tongue across the roof of your mouth. That needs to be pressurized so that there's bone that can grow. We know that mouth breathing changes the shape of the face. This person has very small nostrils. Probably never breathed through her nose in her life. And the consequences of that was the tongue was pushing forward and spread her teeth apart. Depending on how you rest your tongue, throws the teeth off, and when you're mouth breathing, any one of these situations can occur, and it all depends on how you compensate for that airway problem. We know that the sinuses don't grow in people that don't use their sinuses. There's statistically significant differences in total nasal volumes between mouth breathing and nasal breathing. What if you started breathing, or maybe your sinuses stopped growing at the 12-year-old level and now you're 45? What are you supposed to do? That's why it's so important to get these girls to get their mouth closed and have them know that how important breathing is and how important chewing is and how important that is to the future generations. I don't want to heap a lot of guilt on them, but we're in charge of giving them the best advice for living a life. That's what they're here for, to learn from us. And mouth closed breathing is key. We have a lot of potential airway obstructions, including tongue tone, a small palate, allergies, and colds. This is a really good graphic of how close the sinus is to the mouth. The tongue is supposed to be lifted up against the palate, pretty much the way that it shows here. The mouth and the sinuses are very close proximity. So if that top bone there, the maxilla, is smaller, you can see that the tongue is going to get pushed back into the airway. That's where snoring starts. Now all of a sudden you don't have enough room for the teeth. If this was true evolution, the teeth would have gotten smaller also. That's another key difference. So this is why we need to focus in on girls in particular. They are born with all of the eggs. They're developing the DNA in those eggs as they're growing. They're getting the information from their mother and from their grandmother's DNA. They can have a time to repair, but it's going to take some time to make these reparations. They are at highest risk for a high risk pregnancy. If they go rogue, they have a chance to rehab their microbiome, and they can make better food choices than if they're not coached. So for instance, this woman here may have had a great childhood and everything might have been hunky dory for her, and then she goes ahead and has this girl. Maybe she was smoking, this grandma in this picture. Maybe she could still drink when she was pregnant. I was pregnant in the late 1970s and early 80s, and we were allowed 2 beers a day. Maybe her mother smoked. Maybe she smoked because it was still okay. And now we've got 2 generations of damaged DNA in this child. So that child is going to have a child that has changes to the DNA and may be presenting with other problems that are going to show up because of what happened to her immediate ancestors. So we need to focus in on what women are doing for their health. It's going to save us tons of money. All of these people will become mothers or had become mothers, and they all represent different generations. So what has happened in these generations? We have a silent generation, the baby boomers, all these different kinds of generation labels. When they lost teeth, the silent generation had partials. Then near the end of that generation, or right around the 50s or so, we started to see root canals starting to take place. People that would lose teeth had implants, but they also had serial extractions for orthodontics starting back in that time. Serial extractions in the Generation X group, normal thing. Everybody had their teeth out. By the time Generation Y showed up, suddenly it's chewing optional foods. Generation Z, is it food? Is it something to eat? I don't know. I don't care. It's filling my stomach. Look at the ingredients, because look at all these 50 ingredients. They're all healthful. And now we have these mouth-breathing children because they're on such a high allergen diet. We also see these last few generations are part of the fast food and snacking generations, where you have to eat every 2 hours because there's no fat in the diet, there's no sustaining. And so then they tell us that it's to keep your metabolism up. Well, your metabolism needs to have a break, as Dr. Jason Fung is telling us, that your body needs to have time to process all the food. If you're putting more food in every 2 or 3 hours, your body never has a chance to metabolize it and use it fully, so it puts it aside for later while it's trying to get your next snack going. We also see that the baby boomers have a very high incidence of diabetes. They have up to 9 medications as a normal routine. The Generation X started folic acid supplements because that was supposed to stop neural tube deficiencies in infants. And they supplanted the folic acid, which is man-made, for folate, which comes from plants. Then we started seeing Generation Y. Whoa, look at all this ADHD. Look at all this autism. And even though we say today that 60 is the new 40, we can also say that 20 is the new 40. When people who are in their 20s are suffering with lifestyle choices, diseases of lifestyle choices at the age of 20 already. And these poor little kids who are having chronic lifestyle diseases show up and they've had no lifestyle whatsoever. This upper respiratory problem is coming from all of those things. The size of the face is getting smaller, and that's affecting everything because everything needs oxygen. One way to get the face to grow larger is what Dr. Mew calls mewing. He is an orthodontist, a third generation rabble rouser orthodontist in the UK. He has all of his 4-year-old clients and patients chew gum for an hour a day. Okay, so you need to get in line with this chewing idea. He has them chewing multiple pieces of gum, not just a piece. He's got them chewing like 6 pieces of gum or more. It helps to grow the face. We know that lifting weights and doing weight bearing exercises stimulates bony growth in your legs and your arms, right? It's for osteoporosis and osteopenia. This can help the facial bones grow. Dr. Mike Mulligan, who's the past president of the American Academy of Oral Systemic Health, grew his own face. Between orthodontics and myofunctional therapy, he was able to gain a good 1/4 inch in the distance between in the size of his palate. You can see before and after right there. It's amazing. It's just amazing. They keep telling us, they the great and powerful, keep telling us that that's impossible, that it doesn't happen. But he did it, and he sleeps better, he feels better, he's livelier. He has a bunch of different things that he's found that's helpful. And because we don't have enough time to be everybody and be all the people all the time, we have to seek out our specialists. And we have to understand that these top athletes are the ones who are closing their mouths and performing at this high level with their mouths closed, and that we can do that too. It's a simple, simple thing. Keeping your mouth closed is key to good health. It makes you look better, it makes you look smarter. Even people who think for a living do it with their mouth closed. Having your mouth open is not physiologically sound. This is one way that we do it at Primal Air. We are a Buteyko breathing re-education concern as part of our business model. And we help people get more accustomed to a higher level of CO2 so that they can breathe better and more appropriately. Now you can see that Sierra there has a card in her hand. Her mouth just keeps opening. So we had her hold a card between her lips so that she would remember to keep her mouth closed the entire time during that exercise. And here she is. She's going to perform We don't make everybody do a cartwheel, but anybody who wants to can make one. So I really look at this as being a feature of saving money. That this country is going broke. Every single day, people are going into bankruptcy because of medical debt, because there's so many problems, and many of them started from either their diet of their ancestors, their recent ancestors, or by mouth breathing. And we can really make a difference by just addressing those two things. It's the first domino. Breathing and food. It's the first domino to fall. And we can catch these things very early on. What we do at Primal Air as myofunctional therapists is we work with the muscles in the snoring complex. We work with the nose, the mouth, the tongue, the back of the throat, and we help harmonize those muscles so that we can help people breathe better while they're being active. This isn't your basic yoga breathing style. This is what you're doing when you're being a live person. Whether you're cycling or jumping or being chased by a bear or just doing housework, you need to be oxygenated for health. We want you to have respiratory fitness, and we want you to gain respiratory fitness as soon as possible. This isn't a long, dragged out thing. We don't use drugs, we don't use machines, we don't do anything like that. It's just the way your body can work. It's just the way your body can work. We encourage breathing for active people. Now, we don't do all of this right at Sun Prairie. We do probably 60% or more of our appointments are online. And so you can get the treatment that you want even if you don't live near Sun Prairie. We have a pretty good system of videography and photographs, so we can treat almost everybody. Sometimes just can't do it with a video. Very small children, 4 and under, I hesitate strongly, but I always get talked into doing it, and I'm always disappointed. So the 4-year-olds, you'll have to find somebody nearby, 4 and under. So that's what we do at Primal Air, and feel free to give us a call or visit our website and see if there's something there that triggers you to think that we could help you, because that's what we're here to do, is to help people breathe. My name is Shirley Gutkowski. I am the primary practitioner at Primal Air, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks for your time.